Greeting Chairman, distinguished dignitaries, and Indigenous relatives. Water connects us all. Without clean water, there is no life. Mni Wakan, water is sacred. Mni Pajuta, water as our first medicine. Many Indigenous nations believe and know that they were born from water. Yet, Indigenous peoples remain few who remember these original and sacred instructions regarding our intimate relationship with water. We do not separate the Creator from creation. We are facing a worldwide water crisis unlike anything we have ever seen before. Water is being consumed at an alarming rate, used unsustainably, and is contaminated more and more with each passing day. Indigenous peoples, communities, and nations retain the wisdom and traditional ecological knowledge that is most urgently needed to restore a more sustainable future of water. Article 32 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Section 2, provides that states shall consult and cooperate in good faith with the Indigenous peoples concerned through their own representative institution in order to obtain their free and informed consent prior to the approval of any project affecting their lands or territories and other resources, particularly in connection with the development, utilization, or exploitation of mineral, water, or other resources.
My name is Bill Means. In Lakota we say Idakchiji, that means defender. And I come from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, a little town called Porcupine. I presently live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And my mother's from a little village called Greenwood on the Missouri River on the Yankton Reservation. And my father's the one from Pine Ridge. You know, the youth is probably the most overlooked part of this work. But there are avenues that we're finding the youth know what they want in many cases, but nobody asks them. So I think we need to have forums of youth in our home communities that we then bring their issues over here when we come here every year, or when we go to Geneva, or when we go to these international United Nations meetings. Every delegation should have some youth so that they can express what their ideas are, so they become reality and not just a footnote that they were part of a delegation. And so we have to treat them just like we want to be treated as human beings who have human rights also. And that's the way that we can involve the youth, is every chance we get is not only to bring them to these forums, but invite some of these forums to meet our youth on our home territory. Like we say, we're launching this campaign for a decade of water, to study water, to value water, to try to figure out what part it has in our future, in our culture, in our way of life. And then to bring people interested in that issue to our communities and start with a youth panel. All these forums have to have youth involvement, not to make the agenda for them, but let them decide on what part of the agenda they would like to be involved, so that they come from the bottom up, not the top down. There's a lot of youth organizations in the UN already, but they're created by international youth organizations, are created by the UN, and it's usually from the top down. So we don't get that much participation. I think it's up to us as Indigenous people to involve our youth more than as window dressing, more than as members of a delegation. We have to give them the feeling of belonging, of being part of this revolution of Indigenous thought.
Well, my name is Te'ekaya, and it is a formal way of addressing water in which you are recognizing its inherent sanctity. And the literal translation into English would just be that water over there. And the reason why is because when we recognize water, we are referring to a sacred concept and something that's fundamental to our existence, whereas English doesn't necessarily have that gravity to the term. I think that from what I've been taught with the values from my elders that have been instilled in me, which have traveled from generation to generation since, what we refer to as time immemorial, always existing in a way of gratitude to the land and that which gives us life. There's an idea of indebtedness in our culture, that you are indebted to which sustains you, to the water, to the air, to the land. And it's in interdependent relationship. So in Indigenous activism, I think that it goes one step further than what we refer to as environmentalism, because it's an idea that we're not just trying to nurture the land as a resource, but interject ourselves back into a broken cycle of dependence on the land and the land's dependence on us as caretakers and stewards. I think it's important, in these movements that we have to represent what we're trying to achieve. We can't just be fueled off of a negative kind of reaction to what's happening. We have to keep in mind what we're doing this for. We're doing this for healthy lands, healthy waters, healthy people. We're doing this to sing our songs, to speak our language, to wear our regalia without shame, So that's what I decided to do. At an intervention that was delivered in the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, something that really resonated with me was someone who said, without Indigenous languages, we are non-Indigenous minds trapped in Indigenous bodies. And I think that really profoundly resonates, because our philosophy is so intrinsic and so embedded to our language. I think it's so important that we keep that culture, because without the language, we're non-Indigenous minds trapped in Indigenous bodies, and without the culture, we are non-Indigenous peoples, a non-Indigenous community trapped in the Indigenous condition. And I think that without our culture, there's no way our spirit can survive.
In Hawaiian culture, water is a source of life. So in ancient times, the way that water was used and conserved was of the highest importance. In Hawaiian language, the word for water is wai, and the word for being wealthy is wai. So that just shows where on the scale of importance they held water.
Sometimes it just takes patience, I guess, to really move forward. That's one thing that I learned. Things don't just happen immediately, and it does take, all of our people coming together, to just be as one. Like they say, you have one stick, it breaks, but you put a bundle of sticks together, we stand strong,
And water is one of those things. Even Hawaiian culture, it like hula, it touches upon, your spiritual, your mental, your physical. Whether it's just how it replenishes a need in your body. We have cleansing rituals and blessing rituals. We use water, in spiritual kinds of practices. And just in so many other profound ways, it's very meaningful, And so I think if every culture, every indigenous people has brought this together, it'd just be something so cool, that I think people would be excited about.